Hey guys, tonight we're trading pottage for garum and flea-ridden straw for, well, still probably fleas. We're heading into the heart of the ancient world, Imperial Rome. But forget what you saw in Gladiator or those epic historical dramas. The truth of Roman daily life? You'd probably spend half your time trying not to get robbed, burned alive, or drowned in sewage. It was a city of 1,000,000 souls packed tighter than sardines, and just as smelly. So, before you get comfortable, hit that like button and subscribe if you enjoy these deep dives. And as always, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always great to see our global community. Now, dim the lights. Maybe light a few non-toxic scented candles to ward off the imaginary Roman stench. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations! You've just woken up in the year 79 CE. The good news? You're alive in the greatest city the world has ever known. The bad news? Your apartment building is 5 stories tall, made mostly of wood, and smells suspiciously like yesterday's spilled wine and tomorrow's imminent fire. Your bed is a thin straw mattress, if you're lucky, or just a rough wool blanket on the floor if you're not. No memory foam, no spring coils, just something that vaguely approximates comfort until your back reminds you it's made of ancient Roman splinters. There's no Egyptian cotton, just scratchy wool that smells faintly of sheep and unwashed humanity. You blink awake as the cacophony of Rome assaults your ears. It's not a church bell here. It's the roar of carts, the shouting of hawkers, the braying of donkeys, and the general clamor of 1,000,000 people crammed into a city built for half that. It's Rome's version of an alarm clock, only louder, smellier, and far more likely to include a donkey. Your home is a tiny room in an insula, a multi-story apartment block. Think modern-day tenement, but worse. No windows. Or maybe a tiny, unglazed opening onto a narrow, shadowed alley. Open concept? Absolutely. Your entire family, and possibly a few unfortunate roommates, all share the same cramped space. The smell? Oh, it's a fragrant symphony of stale bread, human sweat, cheap oil lamps, and something undefinable from the street below that you pray isn't what you think it is. Scented candles exist, but they're for the rich. For you, it's just the raw, unfiltered aroma of ancient Rome. You try to stretch, but immediately regret it because the air is freezing or stifling hot, depending on the season, and your joints ache. You're 25 years old, which in Roman terms means you've already survived childhood, which was an achievement in itself. Your spine creaks like an old wooden cart, and your knees sound like a bag of pottery shards being shaken by a confused plebeian. Getting out of bed is a gamble. The floor is either damp from a leaking pipe, if you're lucky enough to have one, or gritty from the dust that constantly sifts in. Either way, your bare feet are now part of Rome's ancient ecosystem. Oh, and privacy? What's that? Your entire family, and maybe a random stranger who rented a corner of your room for the night, are waking up beside you. No bedrooms, no curtains, no me time, just communal everything. Welcome to morning in Imperial Rome, where you're never truly alone because parasites, rodents, and several other people are always with you. And this is just how your day starts. It only gets worse from here. So, you've managed to crawl out of your Roman hay pile of horrors. Congrats. Now, nature calls. And it's not calling politely. It's screaming. Here's the part where you start missing the modern bathroom even more than the memory foam. There's no toilet, no seat, no toilet paper, no flush, not even a mildly resentful plunger in the corner. In 79 CE, relieving yourself is an adventure, a social experiment, and often a small public event. If you're a peasant in an insula, your bathroom is likely a chamber pot, which you'll either empty out a window into the street below, shouting cave canem, which means beware of dog, or malum, which means bad, but nobody moves fast enough. Or if you're slightly higher up the social ladder, into a communal latrine. Ah, the communal latrine. Congratulations! You get to sit shoulder to shoulder with strangers on a long marble bench with multiple holes where privacy is a myth and ventilation is a cruel joke. You might make small talk about the latest chariot race, but try not to breathe too deeply. The smell is robust. A permanent, overwhelming aroma of human waste constantly wafting up from the sewer system, if there even is one. These latrines are often built over open channels of running water if the city's aqueducts are functioning, but the stench still lingers like a bad omen. Toilet paper? Never heard of it. Most Romans use a spongia, a sponge on a stick, shared communally and rinsed in a channel of running water, hopefully running clean. If you're feeling especially indulgent, maybe some leaves or old fabric scraps. Sometimes nothing at all, which might explain why handshakes weren't quite the enthusiastic greeting they are today.
And if you're rich enough to have a private latrine in your dama's house, surely it's better, right? Well, sort of. You have your own hole in the ground connected to the sewer, but it's still just a hole. And rats, lots of rats. Giant, ancient Roman sewer rats that can and do climb up. So whether you're a pauper or a patrician, Roman toileting is a humbling ritual. It's public, it's dangerous, imagine falling in, and it's never not disgusting. One slip on a wet, algae-covered marble path in the communal latrine, and you're face first in humanity's leftovers. And you still haven't brushed your teeth, but we'll get to that next. You survived the toilet. You deserve a reward, right? Maybe a nice breakfast. Something warm, delicious, comforting. Sorry, this is Imperial Rome. Nothing is comforting here except maybe the thought of a warm bath, eventually. Breakfast, if you can call it that, is a grim affair. There are no eggs Benedict, no coffee machines sputtering awake, and certainly no avocado toast. You sit down, or more likely squat, near a brazier, if you can afford one, to a piece of stale bread. Welcome to your daily ration of panis quadratus, the standard Roman loaf. It's hard, dense, and often made from coarse barley or emmer wheat flour. No artisanal sourdough here. This loaf is not your friend. It's your caloric minimum. You don't slice it, you break it or gnaw on it until your jaw aches. What about drinks? You're not sipping orange juice or an oat milk latte. You're drinking water, but it's often drawn from public fountains, which, while supplied by aqueducts, can still carry contaminants. Or if you're like most Romans, you're drinking pasca, a watered-down vinegary wine. Yes, even at 6 a.m. Why? Because the alcohol in the wine, no matter how weak, makes it slightly safer to drink than some of the local water sources. Kids drink it too. Nobody's happy about it, but at least it won't kill you immediately, unlike the mysterious water from that stagnant well down the street. Want some meat or cheese? Dream on. That's for special occasions, the rich, or if you manage to catch a pigeon. Most plebeians eat a diet heavy in grains, legumes, lentils, chickpeas, and vegetables like cabbage, onions, and garlic. Meat is a luxury, fresh fruit only when in season and not already bruised or half rotten from the market. As for spices, they exist, but they're incredibly expensive, imported from the far corners of the empire. A pinch of pepper costs more than your weekly wages. Salt is vital, but still a commodity. So you chew your gritty bread, gulp your vinegary pasca, and try not to think about the mouse that may have nibbled your bread in the night. Breakfast doesn't energize you. It just happens to you. And now that you're properly underfed, it's time to get dressed. Not that it'll help. Your wardrobe consists of exactly one, maybe two outfits. It's a rough wool tunic or a linen shift if you're lucky and the weather's hot, that you've worn every day for months, possibly years. There's no such thing as seasonal fashion. There's just wear this until it disintegrates or gives you a suspicious rash. Underwear? Optional. If you're lucky, maybe a simple loincloth. If you're not, well, you're going commando under layers of scratchy, sweaty wool, all lovingly stitched together by someone who probably had no idea what a seam was supposed to look like.
There's also no washing machine, no soap as we know it, and absolutely no dry cleaner in sight. So, your clothes are stained, stiff, and scented like a gladiatorial arena after a particularly lively match. Even if you wanted to wash them, it's not easy. You'd have to haul water from a public fountain or bathhouse, soak your tunic in a large vat, and scrub it with a mixture of fuller's earth, a type of clay, stale urine, ammonia, and possibly lye. Then you'd beat it with sticks and hang it to dry in the sun, hoping a bird doesn't use it as a latrine. And don't get me started on shoes. If you own any, there's simple leather sandals or rough boots, barely stitched together, offering as much arch support as a broken chariot wheel. Most plebeians just go barefoot or wear very basic footwear, through mud, through dung, through Roman landmines, aka sharp pottery shards, animal droppings, and mystery liquids. All this means one thing: your skin hates you. You itch constantly. Fleas, lice, and bedbugs live rent-free on your body. Everyone has them. Nobles, sweaty soldiers, itchy children, walking insect farms. No one escapes. You'll be scratching your armpit with a broken piece of pottery while chatting with your neighbor, and no one will even bat an eye. Your skin is raw from rubbing, your scalp a battlefield of bites. And if you develop a rash, well, too bad. There's no dermatologist, no hydrocortisone, no one to tell you it's probably scabies. You just keep on suffering. And if you're lucky enough to not get an infection, great. That rash will simply accompany you for the next 6 months like an unwanted Roman sidekick. Now that you're dressed in misery and wrapped in discomfort, it's time to flash that morning smile. Except you don't. Because in ancient Rome, smiling broadly is a dangerous game. Not emotionally, dentally. There's no toothbrush as we know it, no toothpaste, no mouthwash, no floss. The concept of oral hygiene is about as popular as bathing daily, which is to say, not very. Some people might chew on a twig or rinse with wine or vinegar, but for the most part, your teeth are on their own. And they're not doing well. By the time you hit your mid-20s, your smile looks something pulled from a haunted Roman catacomb. Cavities are rampant, gums are swollen and bleeding. And those aren't just food stains on your teeth, that's decay. You have more rot in your mouth than a collapsed Roman sewer pipe. Sugar, while available to the rich, honey, and imported fruits, isn't yet the widespread culprit it will become. Instead, your teeth suffer from a diet of hard, gritty bread, abrasive foods, and constant exposure to bacteria. Toothaches, get used to them. They're like Roman weather, always there in the background. The kind of pain that makes you consider praying to Asclepius, drinking yourself into oblivion, or pulling the tooth out yourself with a pair of blacksmith's pliers. And that's not a joke. That was an actual treatment. Dentist as a specialist didn't really exist, but barber surgeons did. Yes, The same guy who shaves your face might also be pulling your molars out by torchlight with iron tongs and zero anesthesia. Infected tooth? Hope you like fevers. Because without antibiotics, it can easily turn into sepsis and kill you from a toothache. That's right. The same thing that sends us to a pharmacy today could be your funeral in 79 CE. And there's no relief on the social front either. Kissing? Good luck. Halitosis, cacophony, as the Romans might say, bad breath, is everywhere. If you're single, you're not judged by your smile, you're judged by your family connections, your land, or your military service. In short, your mouth is a battlefield, and it's losing the war. Now that your teeth are throbbing, let's head outside, because your real job, the one that will break your back, is just getting started. Time to head to work. Except there's no office, no desk, no coffee break, and no chance of promotion. Your job, if you're like 90% of the population, is simple. Don't die while laboring for someone else's comfort. You're a plebeian. Congratulations. That means you likely work either on a small plot of land outside the city or as a manual laborer in Rome itself. You rise with the sun and stop only when it disappears behind the Roman rooftops. Your tools? A pickaxe, a shovel, a hammer, and whatever bones are still intact in your body. There's no weekend. There's no clocking out. There's only sunrise to sunset. 6 days a week. Sunday, or dies solis, is off only if you're not building a new aqueduct, fighting off barbarian raiders, or praying feverishly for your infected toe to stop turning black.
The work is brutal. If you're a farmer, fields are plowed by hand, or with oxen if you're rich enough to afford one. You dig ditches, sow seeds, pull weeds, and carry water until your spine begins to resemble a question mark. No one cares if you're tired. No one's asking how your mental health is doing. If you're a woman, surprise! You don't just do field work or shop work, you also care for children, clean, cook, grind grain, spin wool, fetch water, and pretend your husband's latest venereal disease isn't slowly migrating to your side of the bed. Children? They start helping out around age 5 or 6. No school, no toys, just a tiny broom and a dream of one day not dying of the flu. And if you're one of the few who isn't a farmer, maybe you're a porter, a builder, a tanner, a potter, or a baker. Great. You still work with heavy loads, fire, chemicals, or ungodly hours and poorly ventilated workshops. The pay? Basically survival. The perks? Occasional bleeding. Break a bone? Too bad. Get a fever? Drink some warm wine and keep going. You can't afford to stop, not even for a day. Because if you don't work, you don't eat. And if you don't eat, well, Imperial Rome has a solution for that. It's called being replaced. So you grip your shovel, ignore the blisters, and keep digging. Because in ancient Rome, your job isn't a career. It's a slow-motion endurance test. Now that your back is on fire from laboring in the fields or hauling stones, let's talk about the weather. Because in ancient Rome, temperature is less about seasons and more about ongoing punishment from the sky. Let's start with winter. There's no insulation, no central heating, and no double-glazed windows. Just brick walls with gaps or wooden walls you could throw a cat through. Your windows, if you have any, are covered with wooden shutters or perhaps a thin sheet of mica, not glass. The brazier and the hearth, nice in theory, but you don't have enough charcoal or firewood to keep it going because fuel is expensive. You bundle up in your one damp wool tunic, huddle near the dying embers, and still wake up with your nose frozen. Your feet permanently cold, often damp. Your fingers so stiff they feel like tiny Roman popsicles. Frostbite isn't diagnosed, it's just called bad luck. Now fast forward to summer. Sounds better, right? Wrong. In summer, your insula turns into a clay oven. There's no fan, no air conditioning, and absolutely no deodorant.
You sweat through your layers, but you can't remove them because showing too much skin is scandalous and also invites sunburn, insect bites, and social judgment. The flies are out in full force, attracted to your unwashed body and the smell of last week's fermented fish sauce, garum, that's still clinging to your clothes. Mosquitoes buzz by your ear while you sleep, assuming you can sleep through the sound of your neighbors yelling, babies crying, and the constant hum of Rome at night. In the fields or at the docks, the sun bakes you. No sunblock, no wide-brimmed hat unless you fashioned one out of straw like a desperate scarecrow. And the worst part? You still have to work. Heat stroke is just called taking a bad turn. So you're either shivering in your own hovel, wondering if your toes will make it to spring, or you're sweating through your only pair of sandals while your thighs chafe into oblivion. And the one thing that never changes, no matter the season, your clothes still itch, your food is still terrible, and your next job is still waiting. Welcome to climate control Roman style. There is none. Feeling thirsty? Need to freshen up? Want to splash a little water on your face to wake up from this damp fever dream of a life? Too bad. In ancient Rome, water isn't always your friend. It's trying to murder you quietly.
Let's start with drinking. The nearby public fountain looks fresh, bubbling, and clear, supplied by one of Rome's magnificent aqueducts. But, spoiler alert, it's not always pristine. Upstream, someone just dumped a chamber pot into the river feeding the aqueduct, or a lead pipe has started leaching its toxic goodness into the flow. Parasites, bacteria, and the entire microbial army of ancient Rome await in every sip. That's why many people drank diluted wine, posca, yes, even children. But before you imagine Roman kids doing keg stands, understand that it was very weak in alcohol, strong in survivability. The fermentation process made it safer than whatever flowed through the town ditch. What about bathing? Surely water was used for cleaning. In theory, yes. In practice, a bit more complex. The great public bathhouses, thermae, were a marvel of Roman engineering and social life. You could soak, exercise, socialize, get a massage, and even have a snack. But they were often crowded. The water was rarely changed, and sharing bathing water with hundreds of other unwashed bodies meant communal infections were rapid. Parasites, bacteria, and the entire microbial army of ancient Rome await in every sip. Fungi, skin diseases, and eye infections were common souvenirs. Private bathing was a luxury only the rich could afford, and even then, it involved a lot of labor to heat and carry water. So, whether it's going in your mouth, on your body, or onto your crops, water in ancient Rome is less of a life source and more of a gamble. One wrong gulp, one dip in an infected bath, and you're spending your final days sweating in a straw bed, clutching your stomach, and contemplating all your life choices. Next time you sip tap water, raise a glass for our ancestors. They didn't have the luxury of hydration without hazard. So, you drank the water. Or maybe you didn't. Maybe you just stubbed your toe on a rock shaped like disappointment and it got infected. Either way, you're sick. You need help. You need a doctor. Too bad you live in ancient Rome, where medicine is really just polite torture with a side of superstition. Let's start with the diagnosis. Everything wrong with you, whether it's a cough, a rash, a broken bone, or the creeping plague, is caused by an imbalance of your four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Or by angry gods, or a curse. Got a fever? Too much blood. The answer? Bloodletting. That's right. Let's drain your life force into a bowl using a dull blade, a heated cup, cupping, or hungry leeches. And yes, barbers were often the ones doing it. Imagine getting a trim and a hemoglobin extraction in one sitting. 2 for 1, baby. Feeling sad or anxious? That's clearly an excess of black bile. The cure? Potent laxatives to purge your system, maybe some warm herbal purges, or just prayers to the gods of healing,
and a cold compress while everyone avoids eye contact with you and starts carving your coffin. Now, if you break a bone or get a nasty wound, you're in real trouble. There's no anesthesia unless you count passing out from pain or a sip of opium-laced wine. Surgery is done with bronze instruments that haven't been cleaned since the last gladiator fight. Tools are heated over fire, not for sterilization, germ theory is 2,000 years away, but because they just look scarier that way. Antibiotics? Centuries away. They think disease comes from bad air, miasma, or the whims of the gods. Got a stomach ache? Must have been your sinful thoughts. Hope you like confessing while vomiting. If your condition gets worse, you'll be treated with more leeches, possibly some crushed herbs and dung poultices, and a priest at your bedside giving last rites just in case. At this point, they're preparing for the cure known as death. And if by some miracle you recover, everyone just assumes the gods took pity on you. The doctor takes full credit, and the leech gets promoted. So, yes, in ancient Rome, medicine is less about healing and more about surviving the cure. After a long day of labor, lice, and leeches, it's finally time to eat. You shuffle back to your insula, stomach growling, ready for the one joy left in life. A warm meal. Bad news. Your meal is probably trying to kill you. Let's begin with the basics. Food preservation doesn't really exist as we know it. There's no fridge, no freezer, just salt, smoke, olive oil, or the hope that a cool cellar keeps things fresh. Your meat, if you're lucky enough to have any, has been hanging for days, covered in flies, marinated in questionable brine, and possibly shared with a rat or two. Bread is the cornerstone of the Roman diet, but even that isn't safe. In bad harvest years, desperate plebeians bulk it up with sawdust, ground chaff, or even clay to make it stretch. And if it's stored improperly, molds can grow that cause convulsions or hallucinations. It's like eating bread laced with ancient Roman LSD and tetanus. Vegetables? Only if they're in season. And you know what's always in season? Cabbage, onions, and lentils. So many lentils. Boiled, mashed, or floating in a thin, watery stew. Garum, that infamous fermented fish sauce, is everywhere. It's used to flavor almost everything, and while some love it, its pungent smell and questionable origins make it a health hazard if not properly prepared. Fruit might be available in the fall, but it rots quickly. Sugar is rare, expensive, and hoarded by the rich, mostly in the form of honey or date sugar. Dairy is another gamble. Fresh milk spoils in hours. Butter and cheese fare better, but they're loaded with bacteria. People eat them anyway because, frankly, it's either that or chew your boot leather.
But food isn't just a health hazard. It's a political one. Game animals belong to the rich. Caught poaching a wild boar, you could be beaten, imprisoned, or even executed. That's right, your dinner could get you scourged. So, as you sit down to eat your watery gruel by flickering oil lamp light, remember, every bite is a risk. But you eat anyway, because in ancient Rome, food doesn't nourish, it tests you. It's evening now. You've worked, suffered, and barely digested your suspicious stew. You might think the day is winding down, but don't get too relaxed because the gods are watching. So is your patron, and so is your neighbor Lucius, who will absolutely rat you out if you insult the emperor. In ancient Rome, religion isn't just part of life, it is life. The city's calendar is structured around festivals and sacrifices to a vast pantheon of gods and goddesses. Jupiter, Juno, Minerva, Mars, Venus, and countless others. Missing a sacrifice to the appropriate deity?
bad luck for your crops, your business, your family, or the entire empire. Forget to offer a prayer at the household shrine to your Lares, household gods. Sin. Insult a public official, or worse, the emperor. A sacrilege that could get you charged with treason. And yes, the underworld, Orcus or Hades, is very real. Vividly real. Priests and philosophers describe it in glorious detail. The fiery pits, the tortures for the wicked, the Elysian fields for the favored. If the plague doesn't scare you, eternal suffering definitely will. You can't read complex theological texts yourself because most plebeians are illiterate, and even if you weren't, the elaborate rituals are overseen by priests and pontiffs. You rely on the state and the various cults to interpret everything for you. That means if the augurs say your bad harvest is because you angered Ceres, well, time to offer more sacrifices. Offerings and sacrifices are mandatory. If you grow wheat, you offer wheat. If you raise chickens, you offer eggs. If you have nothing, congratulations, you're spiritually bankrupt and financially doomed. Holidays? They're holy days. Dozens of them. And while they offer breaks from labor, they're not for fun. They're for attending public festivals, making offerings, witnessing sacrifices, and reminding yourself that joy is a dangerous indulgence compared to piety. Questioning the state religion or worshiping foreign gods too openly is dangerous. Christians, for example, are persecuted for refusing to offer sacrifices to the emperor or the Roman gods. They're seen as atheists and threats to social order. Blasphemers are flogged, and skeptics are quickly reformed. So you go through the motions. You chant, you offer, you pray, that your soul, after enduring this dirt-covered life, might finally land in the Elysian fields, assuming the priests like you. Because in ancient Rome, the gods may be fickle, but the state, not so much. If you thought being a Roman plebeian was rough, try doing it as a woman. All the filth, famine, and fear, plus childbirth, subservience, and social invisibility. In ancient Rome, being a woman is like being on hard mode with no health potions and no restart button. From birth, a girl's life path is pretty much locked in. Marry young, bear children, serve your husband, die tired. Education? Not likely. Beyond basic literacy and household management, unless you're from a very wealthy family. Your intellectual development stops around the time you learn how to manage slaves and weave cloth. Marriage happens early, really early. It's not weird to be betrothed at 12 and pregnant by 14. It's not about love, it's about alliances, dowries, and producing heirs. Your opinion? Not required. Once married, you're basically your husband's property, if he has manus over you, which most do. Your job is to produce heirs, feed everyone, keep the house running, and not complain. Because complaining might get you branded a difficult wife, or worse, accused of insubordination. That label comes with a complimentary beating, or worse, depending on your husband's temperament and social standing. Childbirth is a death lottery. There's no prenatal care, no sterile tools, no anesthesia. Midwives do their best, but even minor complications can mean death for the mother, the child, or both. Some women survive 10 pregnancies. Many don't survive 2. But don't worry, once the baby's out, your work increases. Now you have a screaming infant in a cramped insula, and you're expected to nurse, cook, clean, and still help in the fields or market. You don't get a break. You are the break for everyone else. If you're unmarried, you're suspicious. If you're widowed, vulnerable. If you're outspoken, dangerous. Women who didn't conform were often seen as odd, especially if they had unusual skills, a strong personality, or just looked at someone funny on a rainy Tuesday morning. Even in the household, your role is limited. Roman women had legal rights, but these were often tied to their male guardians, fathers, husbands, sons. Your spiritual worth always ranked below men in public religious life. In short, if you're a woman in ancient Rome, you're expected to endure, obey, reproduce, and suffer in silence, ideally while smiling, because even in a time of universal suffering, women were somehow expected to suffer gracefully. So far, you've battled filth, starvation, social injustice, and possibly a stray dog. But just when you think your day can't get any worse, here comes violence. Loud, bloody, and often completely acceptable by Roman standards. Let's be clear, ancient Rome was not peaceful. The idea of law and order mostly meant hope the local guardsman is having a bad day. Violence is everywhere. In the home, in the streets, in the arena, in political disputes, and sometimes in line at the public bath. Crime is common, punishment is brutal, and justice is more performance art than protection. Steal a loaf of bread, you could be flogged or even enslaved. Accused of slandering a noble, your tongue might get cut out. Gossip too much? Meet the public pillory, where you're pelted with rotten vegetables. For correction, of course. Let's say you're accused of something serious, theft, murder, or plotting against the emperor. How do you prove your innocence? By enduring a brutal interrogation, obviously. While not trial by ordeal in the medieval sense, Roman justice was still terrifyingly arbitrary for the common person. You could be tortured for testimony even if you were freeborn. If you're a slave, torture is just part of the process. Confessions extracted under duress are perfectly valid. And if you're sentenced to death, that's a public event. Executions are performed in front of cheering crowds. Crucifixions, beheadings, being thrown to wild animals in the arena. Sometimes people bring snacks. It's the Roman equivalent of cable TV, but with more blood and less subtlety. Domestic violence? Completely normal. Roman fathers had patria potestas, the absolute power of a father over his family, including the right to inflict corporal punishment on his wife and children, even to kill them in extreme cases, though this became rare. Street fights? Commonplace. You could be beaten just for looking the wrong way at a noble's litter. And war? Always simmering. Border skirmishes, provincial revolts, civil wars. Someone's always marching off to stab someone else in the name of honor, Rome, or ambition. Violence isn't a breakdown of society in ancient Rome. It is society. Everyone lives with the constant knowledge that life is fragile, justice is arbitrary, and your neighbor might bash your head in over a debt. So walk carefully, keep your eyes down, and never trust anyone with a sharp stylus. At this point, you've made it through the fleas, the garum, the laundryless misery, and the looming threat of public flogging. But now comes the final chapter of most Roman lives. an early and unglamorous death. If you're alive and still breathing past the age of 40, you're practically a celebrity. You might even be referred to as Senex or Anus, which is less of a nickname and more of a statistical miracle. Let's break it down. The average life expectancy hovers around 25 to 35 years. But that number is dragged down heavily by infant mortality. Nearly half of all children died before reaching age 5. Disease, malnutrition, or one bad winter was all it.
No vaccines, no antibiotics, no hope. If you survived childhood, you entered adulthood already exhausted. Work began as soon as you could walk upright, and by 25, your joints creaked like an old Roman gate. You might be missing several teeth, a finger, and most of your original optimism. Women faced a particularly deadly gauntlet: childbirth. It was one of the leading causes of death for Roman women. No pain relief, no medical intervention, just prayer, hot water, and someone holding your hand while you bled out on a straw-stuffed cot. For men, the dangers were different, but equally relentless. Farming accidents, infections from minor wounds, a neighbor's drunken rage, a military campaign gone sideways. Even walking to the market could be risky if you crossed paths with a bored bandit or an angry tax collector. Death could also come quietly from diseases like malaria, smallpox, or dysentery, which turned cities into cemeteries overnight. Or from famine, which could last entire seasons, thinning out entire villages. Or from bad luck, like an insula fire trapping you inside, or a collapse of your poorly built apartment. And funerals? You were lucky if you got one. Bodies were often burned on a pyre or buried quickly to avoid disease. No embalming for the poor, no polished marble sarcophagi, just a niche in a communal tomb, a columbarium, a few murmured prayers, and perhaps a small pot of ashes, if there was enough space left in the bustling necropolis. So yes, in ancient Roman times, life was brutal, short, and constantly under siege by death in all its casual forms. You didn't retire, you just stopped showing up. And speaking of exits, let's move on to your final chapter. The Roman dream dies. So, how's your day been? You've woken up in filth, relieved yourself into a bucket or a communal latrine, brushed your teeth with wishful thinking, nearly passed out from hunger, worked until your spine cried for mercy, scratched your way through itchy wool, prayed not to get the plague, and barely dodged a public flogging for looking at someone funny. Welcome to a single day in Imperial Rome. Still dreaming of becoming a senator? Think again. That romanticized version of ancient Rome, toga-clad philosophers debating heroic gladiators fighting noble battles and lavish feasts in marble villas, it's a myth polished by Hollywood and historical novels. In truth, the Roman world was gritty, cruel, and deeply unfair. Hierarchy was everything. If you were born poor, you stayed poor. If you were born rich, congratulations, you had a better chance of surviving. But you were still one bad garum away from dysentery and a hasty burial. Even the nobles weren't immune to misery. Their villas, while grand, were still susceptible to disease, political intrigue, and sudden violence. Sure, you had finer tunics and goblets of wine, but also a 50% chance of dying in a political skirmish or from an infected splinter. Not exactly luxury. The simpler times weren't simple. They were relentless. Everything took longer. Everything hurt more. Everything from childbirth to chewing came with consequences. Life was survival, not leisure. And if you did find a quiet moment to think, to dream, to imagine something better, there wasn't much you could do with it. No upward mobility for most, no modern medicine, no library to learn from if you were illiterate. You lived, suffered, worked, and died within a 10-mile radius of where you were born. But here's the wildest part. Through all of this, people still laughed, sang songs, told stories, fell in love, and found meaning. Not because life was easy, but because humans are stubborn like that. Even in the darkest chapters, they made space for light. So tonight, when you slip into your clean bed with indoor plumbing, antibiotics, and central heating, maybe say a quiet thank you to the modern world and to your ancestors who fought rats, famine, and arbitrary justice so you wouldn't have to. The ancient Romans built an empire, yes, but they also lived a life that would shatter most of us in a single day. And that in itself is a testament to the raw, unyielding endurance of humanity.